The last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a Ninject module so that we can load dependencies and map those interface to concrete class mappings. We can do that in a separate place. We don't have to keep adding that throughout the application. So we're going to add a new folder. Call it dependency injection. We're going to add a new class. And then I'm just going to paste everything in here. And we're going to move everything to a separate file. And then we need to add Ninject as a dependency, as a reference to the services project. So let's go to our package manager console. Install package Ninject. Make sure we're on our services project. And there we go. So we'll import that. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not finding that. Let's do a build. That'll give us some errors. Okay, build succeeded. So let's walk through these classes. The first is the interface dependency module, locator module. This is going to be our module that we create. And we just have one method, register dependencies. So this dependency resolver, that's the next interface we'll look at. That comes in and that will help us do the mapping. That'll give us access to the kernel. Take a look at that interface. We have register dependency. And you can set up the scope. Right there's a default parameter there. And then I added this one to use generics, makes it a little easier. And then the get method, which gets the object of type T. Then in our dependency resolver, we have a kernel, and then we just call the bind for the two different the register and bind method. We just call bind from and then to, and then the get calls the kernel get method. Really pretty simple, just an easy way to encapsulate, to extract that functionality for the implementing class. Let's look at IOC. It's a little more in depth. So we have our scope, whether we want transient, request, or singleton. We have our container of type dependency resolver, which we just looked at. We have our get, which will get an object of type T. And then in our initialize, if we want to auto-load modules, it'll go through the current app domain and get the assemblies. In each assembly, it goes through and gets the types. And then it looks for an dependency locator module. So if we have any of those, then in each one of those, we're going to call the load module method of our locator module. And then within that load module, we're going to get the constructor. And if we don't have a constructor, we got issues, serious issues. And then we just try to invoke the constructor, and we register the dependencies. The constructor is on the locator module. So that's pretty simple. Now let's implement our module. So new class, and we're going to call this services module. And all we need to do is we need to implement or inherit from the dependency locator module. And then provide a method there. Now in our resolver, in our register dependencies method, we're going to call resolver bind, and we have iMath service. And then our second parameter is math service. And that's it. Now the rest of the magic happens when we're in our web application, Ninject Web Common. And in our register services, we don't need this anymore. We need IOC .initialize new dependency resolver, and we pass it the kernel. And that's it. So let's take a look at this again and see why this is powerful. So now in our web application, we don't need to worry about setting up dependencies, and we don't need to worry about mapping interfaces to concrete classes. So if we look over at our service module, just as a refresher, here this is where we're setting up the mapping. So any class that uses this as a reference, this services assembly, we'll already have this mapping set up for them. That we're not going to need to map it all over the place. We just map it in one spot right where it exists. The iMath service and math service. So let's test it out. Let's run it. Let's look at our divide method. That still works. And then let's try it from the UI. That works as well. So as you can see, dependency injection really helps us separate things out. It helps us keep things clean, and it provides a good framework for us to develop enterprise level applications and write clean code.